Very, very good evening, Sunday the 12th of January 2025. I hope you're all well, and my apologies for those of you who expect this timely sort of thing to take place. It's not never possible. It's just me with a whole host of old equipment that I've got to stroke and massage and sometimes kick to get it working properly. So that's how I am operating, and I've been operating for the last 5 years. I know many of you are new to me and you're maybe a bit frustrated. My apologies. I am a one-person team who has hardly any idea of how most of this equipment works, which is why you could hear me rummaging around because I had the wrong speaker connected earlier. So I'm thinking, why is that happening? For those of you who do not know who I am, my name is Raja MIAH, and for the last 6 years I have been raising awareness of the scandal that is taking place in my hometown of Oldham. So I promised this evening that I would focus on the evidence. So that is what I plan to do. Let me bring some screen grabs up. Let me bring some content up on my phone so I can make sense of it whilst I'm running through with it as well. And we will get on with this evening's transmission. If you do find value in my work, please do at the very least like. If you can't if you can't support me in any other way, then please consider liking the transmission. I'm just checking how many of you are on. There's 400 of you already on. So there's 400 of you already on. Please at the very least like the broadcast. Please ask me any questions before I start going through what I've got. If you can, the super chats are there. I am 100% community funded, have been from the beginning. Some people ask me, well, he's making money out of it. I say, well, if you think I'm making money out of it, come and spend a week in my life and see for yourself whether it works like that. I would prefer you, if possible, there's a buy me a coffee link and a PayPal link, because I tend to get more of the money that way than via YouTube. But whatever it is, I am eternally grateful for your support. Indeed, Andrew. 400 are watching. Over 400 actually now, mate. So if people could please press the like button, it would be extremely of value to me. Okay, I'm going to do it this way, I think, for most of today. I want to show you this because everything I've done is documented somewhere. And this goes back to September the 8th, 2019, when I first released what was Welcome to Oldham Part 3. It was a couple of days after I dropped my daughter off in school, if you remember, the 1st September 2019. So that's 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Yeah, so that's when we actually put this article out, and it was a dossier of evidence. It was a dossier of evidence which I hoped would trigger the council into just simply holding its hands up and saying there's something very wrong here, we need to call an investigation. It's timestamped there, it went out on Medium. The problem was that I believe as the council, if not the council, as the Labour Party, went to Medium and had it removed because of the evidence I had been releasing. Now, those of you who are familiar with what I then did was I went and learnt is an interesting word, how to use Squarespace. And I put out a whole host of content on Squarespace. I've not updated this website in a long time, and I've left it as it is on purpose because I want people to see I've not tweaked it, I've not changed it, the content is as it was. And I released what was Welcome to Oldham Part 3 in 2 parts, Part 3 and Part 4. Part 3 concentrated on the gangster affiliations of Arooj Shah. Part 4 concentrated on the dossier of evidence. Thank you. So I will just open Part 4 so you can see it. And we'll work our way through it. All of the evidence I've got. And you can see for yourself what's going on. Now, you can see it's a blog. I write. There's a whole host of things set out in a certain way. I'm going to get to that. But I want to start kind of backwards. And I think it'll make sense to you guys as to why I'm doing this. I want to start with Andy Burnham's statement and Malcolm Newson's presentation at the launch of their assurance review. Remember Andy Burnham last week came out and said he acknowledges his review was limited. Well, I want to now, because we've exposed it as a cover-up, and I'll go through that, but I want to go back to the time where he announced to the world the findings of his review. And I want to just play the first section for you because it's vitally important and we work our way back. How to read these? These are published completely online for free on the internet. If you type in recusant-9.com, you will find all of this on there, Arta. It's been there from the beginning. So that is where you'll find it. And the subheading was, "Where politicians pursue power whilst our children are locked in rooms rented out by the hour." So let me and you can see this is from the 20th of June 2022. Here we go.
The publication is part 2 of the independent assurance review of the effectiveness of multi-agency responses to child sexual exploitation in Greater Manchester, and part 2 report concerns Oldham, as you know. So, if I may, just to introduce the panel to you, here at we're joined this morning by Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, Stephen Watson. Next to Stephen is Amanda Chatterton, Councillor Chatterton, the leader of Oldham Borough Council. Next to Amanda, Baroness Beverly Hughes, Deputy Mayor, Greater Manchester. And then far end of the table, Malcolm.
Sorry, that's my fault. He says, trying to work out how to turn the volume up.
Newson, CBE, and Gary Ridgway, our independent review team. And I'll invite Malcolm to speak shortly. So let me just, if I may, set out the background. I set up this overarching review shortly after coming into office in 2017 because I wanted people in Greater Manchester to be able to have confidence in our arrangements for protecting and safeguarding children. In 2005, a major investigation into child sexual exploitation in Manchester had been closed down at short notice, creating doubts that the wrong motives were driving decision-making. And there were allegations of similar elsewhere in the city region. Public confidence comes from a willingness to be unflinching in facing up to these claims and being honest about the past, however difficult that may be. It comes from establishing beyond any doubt that decision-making on this most critical of issues will be driven only by what needs to be done to protect our children, and never by institutional or political concerns. And it comes also from a readiness to bring perpetrators to justice, regardless of the passage of time. It is never too late to face up to past mistakes, to say sorry to those who were failed, nor to prosecute those responsible for appalling crimes against children and young people. This review is helping us do all of those things, and slowly but surely allowing the public to have confidence again. Following the first report, Operation Green Jacket was set up by Greater Manchester Police, and it has so far led to 21 arrests. Operation Lytton, investigating abuse in Rochdale, led to charges against 8 people in March this year, with the trial set for next year. This progress has been achieved through a new GMP force-wide child sexual exploitation unit, which, as you will hear from the Chief Constable, is receiving an uplift in staffing so that it is ready to act on the findings of this Part 2 report. I think it is important for people in Oldham to know that this report and this process of inquiry in Oldham only came about because Oldham politicians had the courage to ask for it, knowing that it was needed to take their community forward. So I would like to thank the former leaders of Oldham Council, Sean Fielding and Aruj Shah, for the leadership they have shown, and this is being continued by the new leader of Oldham, Amanda Chatterton, and we will hear from Amanda shortly. But first, I want to invite Malcolm Newsom to present the findings of his report. Malcolm.
Okay, that was Andy Burnham's introduction to the findings of the Oldham Assurance Review back in 2022. I want to raise a couple of things with you. And what I'm going to do, those of you familiar with my style will know I play a bit, a comment, and we deconstruct things that way. First and foremost, in his introduction, Andy Burnham clearly fails to state or make any reference to any limitations in this review. If anything, his exact words are, "This review is helping ... the public to have confidence again." So actually what he's saying is this review is A star and it's helping the public to have confidence again. No reference whatsoever in his introduction to any limitations whatsoever. Secondly, he says that the review has only come about because Oldham politicians asked for it. That is a complete and utter lie. The review came about because of the relentless pressure by myself and a small number of people from my town who refused to remain silent to the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our town's children. And we detailed this cover-up, or I detailed this cover-up, taking part in a number of arenas. One was shisha bars, 2 children's home, taxi ranks, and so on. And what I also did And I like how I've been written out of the history of this, but we've got a transmission recorded that was released in the past, and I'll play it again so you can see what happened and what these people tried to do. The only reason Sophie's case came back around was because I was contacted by her husband, a lovely gentleman who's since committed suicide, I believe as a direct consequence of all of this, who I assisted in getting her case taken to where it now is, where she was given an apology, and it's global news of how a 12-year-old child was handed over by police officers in a police station to men who took her away and gang raped her, and another man who gang raped her, and another man who gang raped her. None of that would come out in the way it has if it hadn't been for her husband reaching out to me, and if it hadn't been for me putting the stuff out there that led to that. But what I wanted to make clear right from the outset is Andy Burnham makes no reference at all in his introduction to any limitations in his assurance review. I'll carry on playing it. Please, if you're finding value, I've got 1,500 flashing up, so I presume some people are joining late, but there's definitely 500 of you watching right now. At the very least, press like. If you can, please buy me a coffee, buy me a samosa. There's a PayPal link. I am 100% funded by you, and every day at the moment I expect my door to be kicked in and for me to be dragged off to a police station. So please, if you can, support me.
Good morning, everybody. In November 2019, we were asked by Oldham Council and the Mayor of Greater Manchester to undertake a review into safeguarding practices in the Borough of Oldham. Our terms of reference required us to provide assurance regarding allegations made on social media about the risks posed to children in Oldham from child sexual exploitation. We were asked primarily to focus our review between the periods 2011 to 2014, but had authority to extend this timeframe, if necessary, to enable us to provide the necessary assurances. We acknowledge the significant strength of feeling locally in relation to this review and the commentary on social media. We are very grateful to the many individuals who have given their time to support us in our work, and also the immense amount of work to recover the significant amount of documentary evidence we have reviewed. We believe we've produced a thorough, diligent and independent report, not influenced by any party, and have set out in the appendices the significant amount of evidence we have considered before reaching our final conclusions. We've set out in Chapter 1 a summary of our key findings. These are covered in more detail in the respective chapters that form the body of the report. Chapter 2 sets out our methodology and the timeline for bringing forward the report to publication. For legal reasons, our report also contains confidential appendices which will not be published. We've summarised the conclusions of these confidential sections in our published report. I'll now turn to our key messages. We have found that throughout this period, the specialist services tackling child sexual exploitation provided by Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police were strategically ahead of those available in many other local authorities at the time. However, these did not always translate at an operational level into the effective safeguarding of children experiencing sexual exploitation. Our own review of a sample of children has exposed significant failings in the protection provided by the statutory authorities to those children. We understand that Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police have agreed to review the management of these cases to consider whether any further action can now be taken in respect of the men who exploited these children. We have been provided with no evidence to support the allegations circulated on social media to suggest that senior managers or councillors sought to cover up either the existence of child sexual exploitation in Oldham or the complexity involved in tackling the perpetrators.
Okay, I'll stop it there for a minute. That's Malcolm Newson, the so-called expert. There's another one called Gary Ridgway. I believe that their careers are now over as a consequence of what they did here in Oldham. He makes reference to confidential appendices. The confidential appendices include details of the 10 samples that they used. So what they did was they sampled 10 children in Oldham in the 3-year long report. 10 children. In the small print of the report that we can see, so the sample of what happened to these children is hidden. The extensive details of what happened to the 10 children that they sampled is hidden. I've spoken to, I think, at least one, if not 3 of these, but definitely I've spoken to one extensively. I have her testimony. I will share her testimony online again so you can all hear it. He claims, and immediately starts by claiming, that the practice in Oldham was strategically ahead of other places. At no point in that report does it say which other places or how it was strategically ahead, but what he admits to as an afterthought is that whilst they might have been strategically ahead, what was happening on the ground was not the same. He also is keen to say that there is no evidence of a cover-up, even though his terms of reference did not include going out to find evidence of a cover-up. It's like me saying to you that the kebab shop at the top of the road where I go to, and I'm coming back and say, no, they didn't have any chow mein. You've sent me to the wrong place to get the wrong thing. This is the British civil service for you, operating in full flow, in public, right in front of you. And I want to play this. Don't worry, I'm not playing all of it. I'm not playing the full 1.5 hours. There's just Malcolm Newsom's introductory summary I want to play, because it's vital you hear this, and it's vital you make your mind up as to what he is saying, rather than just me interpreting it. And if I'm interpreting something wrong, please ask me the question. If you're not understanding what I'm saying, please ask me the question and I will explain it to you. Because today, well, if Andy Burnham's career isn't over, then Jim McMahon's career most definitely is.
Turn to shisha bars now. A robust approach was taken by Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police to the emerging threat of child sexual exploitation posed by shisha bars between 2011 and 2014. Nonetheless, we have found evidence that a small number of children who were known to be sexually exploited were visiting shisha bars throughout 2011, 2012 and 2013. We have found no evidence that a BBC journalist, who we refer to as journalist...
Blink and you've missed it. He claims that the council and the police had a robust approach to shisha bars, to CSE and shisha bars. That's what we released information. We'll get to the information later, the evidence later. But he's claimed there was a robust approach by both the council and the police to reports of CSE in shisha bars between 2011 to 2014. That's in 3 years. However, in the next sentence, in the very next sentence, he clearly states that a small number of children were being exploited in these shisha bars in 2011, in 2012, in 2013. So how can you have a robust approach to children getting gang raped in shisha bars over a 3-year period if throughout that 3-year period children were getting gang raped in shisha bars? Do I need to have a posh plum accent to convince you in the same way he's trying to convince you? My apologies with my northern working class accent. Isn't convincing enough for you? How can you have a robust approach to reports of child sex exploitation in shisha bars between 2011 to 2014 if children were continuing to be groomed and gang raped in 2011, in 2012, in 2013? Am I a liar now? Do you see how they twisted the report? Am I a liar now? Because that's the main thing I expose first and foremost. Children being dragged off the streets. Remember I said that, being dragged off the streets in broad daylight. He also says, such a scumbag thing to say, a small number. If it was his child, it wouldn't be a small number, would it? What he omits clarifying is what that small number is. Because I've come across evidence that in the period of 2011 to 2013, in the period of this review, up to 2014, so in the period of this review, the number of referrals made, safeguarding referrals made to social services in Oldham Council was 11,000. 11,000. And I will evidence you exactly where I get the 11,000 from before we finish this evening. Of course, we do not know how many of those 11,000 were gang raped by members of the Pakistani rape gangs, nor do we know how many of those 11,000 were in any way intervened by the police or the authorities who took steps to safeguard them or not. We know nothing. Just the 11,000 figures I've got. Sorry, there's just me here, so if there's comments coming up that people don't want to see, someone just tell me and I will try my best to delete them. But if I can't, if I miss them, it's because there's a lot of comments coming up. You're all grown people, you're all the adults here. Please, if there's something you don't like, if something said someone, it's nowhere a reflection of me, it's not a reflection of you. There are many people right from the outset who've been trying to undermine what the work we do, take it to an extreme place or undermine it as though it doesn't exist. We know who we are, we know why we're here, and it is to safeguard children. So please, focus on this.
A colluded with Oldham Council in not highlighting the potential threat presented by shisha bars. Quite to the contrary, we've seen clear evidence that journalist A appropriately challenged and scrutinised the position held by both Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police and continued to investigate the story, which was eventually broadcast by the BBC.
Journalist A is a man called Kevin Fitzpatrick. He comes from the powerful Fitzpatrick family in the Labour Party. Apparently, according to Newsom, there's clear evidence that he appropriately challenged That is absolute nonsense. And then he went on to report it. He did go on to report it many months later as part of a wider piece to do with shisha bars across Greater Manchester, not the specific allegations he was informed of at the time in Oldham. So you can see straight away, again, how Malcolm Newsome is being evasive with the truth. Clear evidence that he appropriately challenged. Well, what's appropriately challenged? What is the clear evidence of appropriately challenging? Is it this? I'll bring up the original before I use the yellow highlighter on it. You'll have all seen it with the yellow highlighter, I'm sure. This is the actual original. This is me photographing it. I just need to... what's happened there? There you go. This is the original email before it was all highlighted. You can see Kevin Fitzpatrick's name there. The bit I want to show you in terms of appropriately challenged. Look at the second to last paragraph. I want to make it clear that when I said I would stop pursuing the CSE story about the private clubs, that is what I did. I want to make it clear that when I said I would stop pursuing the CSE story about the private clubs, that is what I did. Does that sound like it was appropriately challenged? Of course not. I feel my integrity is being questioned, so I hope this puts the record straight. I have always had a good relationship with your communications team and would be very disappointed if your misunderstanding damaged the trust between us. Is that appropriately challenged? Look at the paragraph, the third paragraph at the top. On this basis, I agreed to hold any story on the private clubs for the time being. I have been true to my word. Is that appropriately challenged? We agreed not to broadcast anything after you told us that knowledge about the activities at these clubs was very limited, and you were concerned about tensions in the town ahead of Lee Rigby's funeral. Is that appropriately challenged? Vermate, here's Jim McMahon's name. I can't put it up on the screen at once for some reason. It's just, I'm sorry, mate. It's there. That's the email. So that is the email that he is claiming journalist A, which is this one, appropriately challenged the leader of the council and Oldham Council. Let me do that. Is that any better? No. It's because I've got it on landscape rather than portrait, that's why. Okay, carry on with the video.
Residential care homes. We've been provided with no evidence to suggest there was widespread sexual exploitation of children in residential settings in Oldham. There is evidence that some children in residential settings were being exposed to child sexual exploitation. Some of these children had suffered this abuse prior to their admission. There is also evidence that some children who had not been exposed to sexual exploitation were drawn into it through the encouragement of other residents. However, the evidence suggests that residential staff worked in a professional and supportive way with these children to win their trust and protect them as far as possible from further abuse. We have concluded that there were, throughout this period, legitimate concerns on
residential care homes. No evidence, not of CSE, of widespread CSE. The word he's introduced there is widespread. What is widespread? 80%? 90%? There is no evidence of widespread. The word widespread is to damage limitation and to try and evade from outright lying. Some children were drawn into CSE, were drawn into as though they are active partners in it. We put our children in care homes, and some children were drawn into it as though they're active partners in it, but it's okay because he then quantifies it by saying, oh, but they were getting gang raped before they came into care. Then he has the audacity to try and excuse how other children who had never had anything to do with CSE had demonstrated no risk-taking behaviour, nothing. They might have been put in care because the mum was a drug addict, I don't know. These children were apparently groomed by the other children. So it's the other children's fault that children who were never at risk of getting gang raped by Pakistani men were now subsequently gang raped by Pakistani men. I'm not making any of this up. All I'm doing is picking up exactly what he's saying and deconstructing it. And all the time he's saying some evidence, some children. How many is some children? How many is some children? The next bit I want you to listen to.
To consider whether any further action can now be taken in respect of the men who exploited these children. We have been provided with no evidence to support the allegations circulated on social media to suggest that senior managers or councillors sought to cover up either the existence of child sexual exploitation in Oldham or the complexity involved in tackling the perpetrators. Turn to shisha bars now. A robust approach was taken by Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police to the emerging threat of child sexual exploitation posed by shisha bars between 2011 and 2014. Nonetheless, we have found evidence that a small number of children who were known to be sexually exploited were visiting shisha bars throughout 2011, 2012 and 2013. We have found no evidence that a BBC journalist, who we refer to as Journalist A, colluded with Oldham Council in not highlighting the potential threat presented by shisha bars. Quite to the contrary, we've seen clear evidence that journalist A appropriately challenged and scrutinised the position held by both Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police, and continued to investigate the story, which was eventually broadcast by the BBC. Residential care homes. We've been provided with no evidence to suggest there was widespread sexual exploitation of children in residential settings in Oldham. There is evidence that some children in residential settings were being exposed to child sexual exploitation. Some of these children had suffered this abuse prior to their admission. There is also evidence that some children who had not been exposed to sexual exploitation were drawn into it through the encouragement of other residents. However, the evidence suggests...
You've heard that, yeah? We're all there, DC? Yes, Julie, twisting the truth. Drawn into it by other residents, yeah. Who has the duty of care?
That residential staff worked in a professional and supportive way with these children to win their trust and protect them as far as possible from further abuse. We have concluded that there were, throughout this period, legitimate concerns on the part of both the council and the police that the high-profile convictions of predominantly Pakistani offenders across the country could be capitalised on by a far-right agenda and lead to the victimisation of the Pakistani community.
You absolutely heard that right. Andy Burnham's review team talks about quantifying why these children weren't being protected because of legitimate concerns of the high-profile convictions which could result in the demonisation of the Pakistani community. They put, first and foremost, the police and the council, you heard it there, word for word, you heard it. They put the feelings of a community that they didn't even ask, by the way, so we're clear. I'm not blaming the Pakistani community for this. They put the feelings of what they felt was the upset it might cause to the wider Pakistani community ahead of going after the Pakistani rape gangs. Blame the far right. Legitimate concerns. Well, what made them legitimate concerns? Had the local mosque been burnt down? No. Was one of the Asian taxi drivers stopped and battered and dragged out of his car because he might have been a groomer? No. What were the legitimate concerns? And in what world is any concern applicable not to go out and arrest men who gang rape little girls?
Social cohesion and far-right activity had been a consistent focus of the public authorities in Oldham since the 2001 riots. However, it is clear from all the evidence we have seen that the council and its partners in no way avoided addressing this, and in fact saw successful disruption and prosecution as the route to winning the confidence of all communities in Oldham.
So apparently, even though these legitimate concerns were there, It didn't stop us from doing our jobs. We still went after them for successful prosecutions and closing them down. Well, how many successful prosecutions were there? I can't find one. How many successful prosecutions were there? We know you've admitted the shisha bars operated in 2011, 2012 and 2013. So the 4-year period or the 3-year period, however window you decide that, for at least 3 of the 4 years, they operated where children were being groomed and gang raped. You confirm that in residential homes, children were being groomed and gang raped. Not just those who were put into those homes to protect them because they'd already been caught up in that vicious world, but also children who had nothing to do with that world were being exploited simply because they'd been put in care. You've admitted all of that. So I want to know how many groomers were prosecuted. How many members of the trafficking gangs were prosecuted? And how many of the customers, the thousands of customers, were prosecuted? Is it 0, 0, 0? Because if there were numbers, we would be given numbers, wouldn't we? And in the background of all of this, I've got this figure, 11,000 safeguarding referrals. Let's carry on.
Taxi licensing. We have concluded that we've been provided with no evidence to suggest that senior managers or councillors sought to cover up the potential exploitation of children by local taxi services. We have found that the council licensing panel had previously approved several licences to individuals who had been either accused or convicted of serious sexual offences. However, this serious weakness was recognised in subsequent years, and the council strengthened its licensing policies in line with the more robust national guidance.
No evidence senior managers or councillors were involved when it came to taxis. Next sentence, the council's licensing panel were responsible for continuing to let men who'd been accused of or convicted of serious sexual offences continue to drive taxis. Well, who the fuck sits on a council licensing panel if it isn't councillors and senior managers in the council? Does the bloke from the mosque sit on it? The kebab shop guy? The local heroin dealer? Who sits on the licensing panel, you prick? It is senior manager of the council and councillors. They all sat there listening to this shit. They all sat there listening to this. And he owns up to taxi drivers being allowed to have their license, even though they've been accused or convicted of serious sexual offences, but is kind of wishy-washy as to serious sexual offences against who? How many? Remember, in a town like mine, at most towns across the country, taxis provide a valuable service, an essential service to ferrying around children to schools, particularly those who are vulnerable. And when I brought the allegation forward of taxis, it was specific to a firm called Telecars, where a friend of mine, a taxi driver, came to me distraught of how we'd found a child in a very bad way. He wouldn't go into graphic details, but because he isn't that sort of man, but it was very clear to me with the look in his eyes what he meant by a very bad way. He took her back to the taxi office, made the girls in the taxi office phone the police, phone an ambulance. No reference to any of that. Or no reference to how when he chased it up, because he's a family man, genuinely concerned, the police told him, Mr. X, if we start arresting one, we wouldn't know where to stop. But no evidence of senior managers or councillors, yet the licensing panel is made up of senior managers and councillors, and that licensing panel renewed the licence of I don't know how many individuals who then were accused or had already been convicted of serial sexual offences against, well, I would imagine it's children. If it was adults, he would have said it's adults. But it's okay. They fixed it in subsequent years. They fixed it later.
I'll now turn to Sophie. We have considered a specific complaint by a person we refer to as Sophie. In 2019, Sophie wrote an open letter to the leader of the council, and in summary, this letter contained serious allegations that Sophie was subjected to profound sexual exploitation, and that Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police failed in their duties to protect her. Sophie also complained that when these shortcomings were raised with both Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police, they failed to investigate them appropriately and denied any failures on their part. We have concluded that the interventions of both the Council and Greater Manchester Police and the investigations into her allegations fell far short of what was required to protect Sophie, who was only 12 years old at the time of her abuse. Furthermore, we have concluded that these failures have been compounded by the denials that have subsequently been issued to Sophie and also to the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee at the time. This lack of candour feeds the view that both agencies were more concerned about covering up their failures than acknowledging the harm that had been done to a vulnerable young person. We found no evidence that this approach was influenced by the leader of the council at the time or any other politician. However, we recommend in our report that both Greater Manchester Police and Oldham Council publicly acknowledge these serious failures and apologise to Sophie. We have also reviewed the case.
He owns up that the gang rape of a 12-year-old child who then went crying to the police and the council, duty of care, he owns up that they need to apologise. So he owns up to that element. What he makes reference to is the less of candid nature, which means dishonesty. Less than candid basically means dishonesty in posh English talk of the council in terms of issuing denials, not just directly to Sophie and her husband, but to the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee. The Home Affairs Select Committee is one of the most powerful government committees in this country, They got involved. They're up to the council, and I've got their response here. And the response says, she's vexatious, too much time has passed, the passage of time. And now what he's saying, what Newsom is saying, oh no, there's no evidence that the leader of the council was involved. As if the leader of the council wouldn't be involved in writing back to the most powerful government committee in this country. As if that never crossed his desk. It's inconceivable. It's absolutely inconceivable. And the leader of the council was Jim McMahon, who is now a senior minister, a minister of state in His Majesty's government. But they've seen no evidence. Did they even go looking for the evidence? Did they ask McMahon when they interviewed him, were you aware of this case? Were you aware that the Home Affairs Select Committee had written? Who did the Home Affairs Select Committee write to? Where is that email? Hidden, hidden, hidden.
Of known offenders previously employed within Oldham Council, and we also considered councillors and others with positions in the council against whom serious allegations have been made. While we have included as much information as possible in our published report, for legal reasons we have placed some of the detail of our findings in a confidential appendix and have put our conclusions in the published report. We have concluded that there were a number of failings in the investigation of these cases, and these are set out in our report. I'll now turn to Offender A. A man we have called Offender A worked...
Offender A is Shabir Ahmed, the ringleader of the Rochdale grooming gang.
...for Oldham Council between 1988 and 2006 as a welfare rights officer. In 2012, he was sentenced to 19 years imprisonment for serious offences relating to child sexual exploitation. And in June 2012, he was found guilty of a further 30 rape charges and was jailed for an additional 22 years. We have concluded that there were serious multiple failures by both Greater Manchester Police and Oldham Council to follow the procedures in place to investigate the threat he presented to children between 2005 and 2012. We believe that if the appropriate procedures had been followed, his offending behaviour could have been addressed at an earlier stage, and potentially the abuse of his subsequent victims may have been prevented. We have also considered the matter of a councillor.
So they accept that a man who worked for Oldham Council for 18 years, the council and the police should have intervened against him earlier. Serious multiple failures between 2005 and 2012. For 7 years, the police and the council covered up for Shabir Daddy Ahmed. And if they'd arrested him earlier, then the likelihood, well, what do you mean the likelihood? Of course. If they'd arrested him earlier, how can you go and rape 30 other children, or whatever it was, after that period, if they'd arrested him first? He'd have been in prison. If he's in prison, he can't rape those other children, can he? It's a given. Not possibly. It's a given. What he omits standing there is that Shabir Daddy Ahmed was a prominent member of the Labour Party in the town who to this day has associates in the council chamber who is well known to, he would have called friends at the time. There are councillors sat in that council chamber who were friends with this man. Why do you think the police and the council looked the other way for 7 years?
We have called Councillor V, and the allegation on social media that he was victimised following the sharing of sensitive information in respect of shisha bars. We have concluded that there was a legitimate concern by both the leader of the council and the Police and Crime Commissioner at the time that confidential information had been inappropriately shared with a third party by Councillor V. We do not therefore believe that there were grounds to support the allegation that Councillor V had been victimised.
He just read that out. He just read that out as though it means nothing. Councillor V is a man called Councillor Hughie McDonald. Councillor Hughie McDonald did release confidential materials. That confidential material was to warn an agency that worked with vulnerable children to be careful of the shisha bars and to warn their staff. But he's okay. How dare he share legitimate concerns? You get what you've asked for. You got what you deserved. You got sacked. You deserve to get sacked for trying to safeguard children. It's okay that McMahon, the leader of the council, and the Police and Crime Commissioner, Tony Lloyd, who now is, Dantic, the former Rochdale MP, has come out openly and said he was warned off doing anything about the rape gangs in case he would lose votes. That's what the Police and Crime Commissioner at the time of all of it told Dantic. So Tony Lloyd, who's now dead, warned off Simon Dantic, the former Rochdale MP, and now the Police and Crime Commissioner Tony Lloyd is working in partnership here, as all but admitted by Malcolm Newsom. Police and Crime Commissioner and the leader of the council did not victimise him. They just, because how dare he? He got what he asked for. How dare Hughie MacDonald, a 20-year councillor, probably more from what I can remember, chief magistrate in the town at one time for 15 years or more. How dare he try and save children? How dare he? Indeed. He was sacked before he cared.
Finally, we also reviewed the matter of another councillor we call Councillor Z and the allegation that he was punished for being a whistleblower. We believe that there were some inconsistencies and false assumptions in the report produced by an independent law firm into the standards complaint made against Councillor Z. We acknowledge, however, that the law firm acted in good faith and that the council was not responsible for the content of the independent investigation report or in any position to require the independent investigator to reconsider or amend their view.
This is something straight out of Yes Minister, or Yes Prime Minister. There were some inconsistencies and false reports, so that means there were lies. So the council hired an independent law firm to investigate the concerns raised by a whistleblower. That guy's name is Kaiser Raymond. Some inconsistencies and false reports by the law firm. So the law firm lied. But it's okay, they acted in good faith. And anyway, in any case, it wasn't for the council to check to see whether the evidence, the report presented by the firm they hired was telling the truth or not. It would be funny if it wasn't serious, yes? All of this would be funny if it wasn't serious. This is meant to be an expert investigator. Malcolm Newsom, I think is it CBE, Commander of the British Empire, is meant to be an expert investigator.
In conclusion, we would emphasise that during the period covered by our review, the strategic intent of senior leaders in Oldham was to tackle child sexual exploitation, and in that regard, they were ahead of many local areas. Nonetheless, our report has uncovered historic failings in the protection offered to specific vulnerable children at that time. There remains an opportunity for Greater Manchester Police and Oldham Council to now work with Sophie and the other survivors we have highlighted in our report to ensure that every opportunity is taken to bring the perpetrators who abuse them to justice. Thank you.
In conclusion, the intent was to tackle. So we had the best of intentions. It's like my friend who's an alcoholic. He goes out, Raja had the best of intentions not to go and get drunk. Or the gambler had the best of intentions not to blow this week's wages at the casino. Well, your intentions aren't what you measured by. It's your actions, particularly if you're the police or if you're the local authority or if you're the councillors, the council leader, whatever, the politicians. Your intent is not what you are measured by. Nonetheless, historic failings into their sample group. Do you know how many they sampled? They sampled 10 children. Do you know how many they found historic failings in? All 10 children. So every 10 children, all of the 10 children that they sampled, because they won't say how many children there are, so they only did a sample. Is that not a limitation in its own right? Forget we didn't have the powers. When you don't, when you do have the powers and you still fall short, that's not a limitation, that's a cover-up. Watch this next bit by Burnham.
Thank you very much indeed, Malcolm. And can I thank you too, Gary, both of you, for the painstaking way in which you've put this thorough report together. And we are all deeply grateful to you both. Could I now invite Councillor Amanda Chatterton to respond?
A matter of public record, Burnham refers to the report as a thorough report, painstakingly put together. Burnham's own words, thorough report, painstakingly put together. As a consequence of that report, painstakingly put together, that we've now ripped apart to pieces, Debbie Abrahams, Jim McMahon and Angela Rayner released the following statement in response to the publication of the Oldham Independent Assurance Review. That is on Parliamentary letterhead. You can see it there, that's on Parliamentary letterhead. So the report has helped cover up what's took place, and immediately the politicians involved in the town used the report to issue this statement on Parliamentary letterhead. This is one of the most comprehensive safeguarding reviews undertaken. Outright lie. And we welcome the recognition of the progress that was made in Oldham in shining a light on, disrupting and tackling child sexual exploitation and raising awareness to increase reporting. It is an uncomfortable and disturbing fact that abuse takes place in every city, town and village, and Oldham is not immune from that. The vast majority of victims are well supported, and professionals are working hard to meet increasing demand and changes to the nature and pattern of abuse as it develops. However, the report is clear that not all victims receive the support they deserve, and one victim let down is one too many. Well, you don't say how many victims were let down, do you? And you continue with this nonsense. Our priority, as in the priority of Debbie Abrahams, Jim McMahon and Angela Rayner, has always been supporting the victims, and as MPs will continue to support victims' right to justice when the system fails short. All three of these MPs, well, Rayner abstained, but the other two voted against a public inquiry. So how they are supporting victims' rights to justice, I do not know. Today's independent review identifies that whilst these incidences are not current cases, there is still work to be done in ensuring offenders face the full force of the law, and the passage of time should not be a barrier to justice. Well, McMahon's council wrote back a letter to the Home Affairs Committee making specific reference to the barrier to the passage of time as being a barrier to justice, and I'll bring that up in a moment. This independent review also addressed head-on the false and often politically motivated conspiracy theories that claimed grooming gangs were operating under the protection of senior politicians. The review was clear that there is no basis for these accusations, and we are pleased that the report draws a line under this. We hope today allows trust in the system to be rebuilt so that victims who have not already come forward have the confidence to do so. So this is how a British-style cover-up works. Members of the community outraged that their children have been groomed and gang raped have got to fight for an investigation to take place. The leader of Oldham Council at the time, Sean Fielding, stands up in the council chamber and repeatedly shouts barefaced lies. Eventually forced to do something after he sends letters to the employers of people who are objecting, trying to have them sacked, launching a police operation called Operation Hexagon to go after members of the public, including me. He goes to his friend, the Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham, who agrees to conduct an assurance review. That assurance review's terms of references are so rigged, it is unlikely to find anything. And even what it does find, when the report comes out, the lead investigator, Malcolm Newsom, stands up and presents something in such a way where if you listen carefully, you can find how it is nothing but a cover-up. The mayor thanks him as though it's a thorough report, and the MPs who are at risk issue a statement on parliamentary letter-headed paper claiming that it is the most comprehensive safeguarding review undertaken, one of the most comprehensive safeguarding reviews undertaken, and it addresses head-on the false and politically motivated conspiracy theories that claim grooming gangs were operating under the protection of senior politicians. Well, let's look at the evidence. Thank you for the super chat. Let me just get a drink, please, and then I'll look at the evidence. If you find value, please consider buying me a coffee. Or using the PayPal link, I'll just top up my Vimto and I will go through the evidence. I've wanted to do this for some time, and then you can see, you can judge for yourself. And I'm sure you're already judging for yourself. That's why I wanted to do it backwards, really. Start with the report to show how what's been presented and how it's been presented, and then go back to the evidence that started all of this. You can listen to this song whilst I go for a drink.
Time to stand up now. We can't carry on like this.
Joanne, I'm trying desperately. I am trying desperately to do that. Okay, I think we've lost a few. We've lost some of the nice Labour Party people who've gone for a stiff drink, I would imagine. More of a stiffer drink than my Vimto cordial. That's what he's trying to do, get ahead of the narrative. But I think we've evidenced. Yeah, we have the rug, don't we? So I see a lot of, I did this, he did this, someone else did this. The Times are rewriting the narrative. Let me play something else. And look, here you go. Not only did they release that statement, McMahon tweeted it. Following the publication of the Oldham Independent Assurance Review this morning, myself, Debbie Abrahams MP and Angela Rayner MP have released the following statement. I don't want it playing on AirPlay. What's it doing?
Hello, Charlotte Green, Manchester Evening News. This is a question, I suppose, mostly for Amanda, but also for Stephen Watson. Do the findings of this report, to any extent, vindicate the allegations made online by blogger Raja MIAH, also known as Recusant Raja, which to some extent are largely the reason why this review was launched in the first place in 2019?
Thank you. I don't know whether, as well as Amanda and Stephen, but whether Malcolm would want to comment on that, because it is obviously the finding of the review and the reasons for the finding, but you directed it towards Amanda. I don't know whether you wanted to say anything on that.
Yeah, I mean, Malcolm obviously can come in because he's written the review. But no, it doesn't. The report quite clearly states there was no cover-up whatsoever. And when Sean instigated this review in 2009, obviously that was in response to, quite a lot of residents' concerns. Some of that had sprang up online, well, a lot of that had sprang up online around a cover-up between Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police, and that we actively hid this abuse for, electoral and political advantage. And the report clearly states there is absolutely no evidence to substantiate that claim whatsoever. And to me, I'm not surprised by that, and I wasn't surprised. I didn't expect there to be a cover-up. Nobody becomes a councillor or goes into local government to cover up child sex abuse. It's just not the reality of where we are. We go into it to improve people's lives and to do the right thing and to do the best for the town, for that time that we're in office. And to me, it absolutely puts to bed that notion that we've had in Oldham and it's over 2.5 years now. It's probably 3 years getting on. Well, it will be 3 years this November, won't it, for the report? But it absolutely puts to bed that no politician and no officer of Greater Manchester Police or officer of the council was involved in any kind of cover-up. And actually, we were really honest and really open about the challenges we faced at the time in relation to CSE.
Thanks, Amanda.
They were really honest about the challenges they faced at the time. Is another outright lie. And the no cover-up whatsoever, desperate to shift away from everything I had been exposing. You've seen the evidence of the cover-up. In what Malcolm Newson has said, how he said things, how he didn't say things. Now listen to what he adds again.
Malcolm?
Yeah, thank you. If I could just add to that, we were obviously mindful of the allegations on social media, but we were determined that our report focused on the evidence in respect of what happened throughout that period, and we always followed where the evidence took us. And I'm very mindful you've only just been given a very substantial 200-page report, but we have deliberately laid out all of the evidence we've looked at so that actually the reader can understand why we've come to our opinions, because we don't make our conclusions lightly. And we're absolutely confident that the allegation that senior politicians were covering up both the existence of child sexual exploitation and also the complexity of tackling it there is no basis.
Forget the BBC email for a moment. For a moment, forget that. The BBC email is, let me see if I can, the BBC email is dated the 7th of August 2013. Let's look at the evidence laid out in this document. Sorry, you can't see that, can you? And I can't do anything here with this, I'm afraid. Let me dismantle my setup and see if that makes any difference. Give me one moment. Let me see if I can fix this so you can see it as well. I might have to just try and do some. There you go. Got there in the end. I'm afraid you can live with a white border, I presume. All of this is online. It's published on my webpage. You can see it. The first email is from Hayden Roberts. Hayden Roberts was a senior police officer. He was... And he sends this letter on the 5th of June 2013 to Councillor Jean Stretton, Neil Crabtree, Chancellor Shoaib Akhtar. Jean Stretton went on to become leader of the council and then was deposed and replaced by Sean Fielding. McMahon didn't like her. Shoaib Akhtar, I think, was deputy at the time. He's now one of the senior councillors of the Pakistani sectarian Oldham group. Carolyn Wilkins, on that name, was the deputy chief executive of Oldham Council at the time. And you can see the last name there, Councillor Jim McMahon, Oldham Council leader. And CC'd there is Councillor Hughie MacDonald. Subject, Shisha. So this is one of the most senior police officers in Oldham writing this. Colleagues, I did not see the TV reports on this story last night, but a colleague has updated me, and we have premises that fits this profile in Oldham. So there's a TV report on how shisha bars are being used to groom and gang rape children. The police are immediately concerned because they have premises that fits this profile in Oldham. This is in 2013, remember, this email. Newsom has admitted that children were being groomed and gang raped in these venues in 2011, 2012 and 2013. Approximately 18 months ago, a premises Cafe Mist, Horsehead Street, was operating as a public-facing shisha bar, i.e. advertised itself as such and operated as such. Responding to intelligence that underage girls were engaging in sexual activity in the premises for alcohol, a full police-led raid was conducted on the premises. Exactly as this news report, there were no substantive criminal offences committed, i.e. drug supply. Environmental health colleagues require evidence of actual smoking. These premises become private clubs, often advertising themselves on the internet via Facebook as a shisha bar that the front door is locked and access will only be given to known faces. Claudutz is a registered company. The Leisure Lounge was formerly Riley's Snooker Hall and is also operating as a shisha bar, but is currently closed and advertised for sale on Facebook. Interestingly, I received a call from a safeguarding officer from Havershaw College, that's a school, to say over the weekend some of their pupils had been seen removing TVs and other property from the Leisure Lounge and taking it into Oasis Cafe. GMP received intelligence that an Asian heritage girl from Tameside had been going into the Leisure Lounge without her parents' knowledge, and she was being blackmailed into giving oral sex, the threat being the offenders would tell her parents. Last paragraph. These premises pose a significant safeguarding risk. The operators are savvy at using the internet to market their activities and make contact with young people. They operate behind multiple changes of ownership and subletting and current legislation around ASB, antisocial behaviour, business rates, enforcement, etc. So he's worried. Councillor Jean Stretton responds, given the reports this evening about the Blackburn shisha bars where there appears to be a link to CSE, please can you advise the current situation with shisha bars in Oldham? Remember, Jim McMahon says limited knowledge in his letter back to the copper. Here, I'm going to keep going back to this, to Kevin Fitzpatrick. You assured us this issue, end of first paragraph, wasn't concerned about potential blah blah, but you assured this issue wasn't being ignored, that you were monitoring the situation, and should action be taken, we would be the first to know. We agreed not to broadcast anything after you told us that knowledge about the activities at these clubs was very limited. Well, here is one of the most senior police officers, and it's clearly not limited. Here is the Community Safety Services. Again, Hayden Roberts, Chief Inspector, signs this off, writing to Michael MIAH, the MP, on the 13th of June. So concerned, he's writing to the MP on behalf of Oldham Local Children's Safeguarding Board and the Community and Cohesion Partnership in relation to an emerging safeguarding risk relating to young people and premises. Last paragraph, there is intelligence. So this is a senior police officer writing to the MP saying there is intelligence to suggest that young people who access these venues are vulnerable to child sex exploitation. Now we know it's a matter of fact because that's why I played it backwards. Newsom had to admit it that in 2011, 2012 and 2013, children were being groomed and gang raped in these venues. Proven. Some children apparently. Oh, it's okay, some. Matter of fact, this is evidenced by reports of a girl being blackmailed into giving oral sex as the offenders had photographed her in a compromising position and her parents did not know she was going to the premises. Her parents were from a minority community and she feared honour issues if they found out. So I think that's a giving, isn't it? You know, we know what's gone on. There are other premises which are used for parties where adult males who control the premises or attend and who have received multiple abduction warnings. Oh my God. There are other premises which are used for parties where adult males who control the premises or attend and who have received multiple abduction warnings to protect individual children, but they simply through a network invite other children, plying them with drinks and drugs and exploiting them when they are vulnerable. What do you think exploiting them when they are vulnerable means, people? What do you think exploiting them when they are vulnerable means? It is gang raping little girls by Pakistani men. So much so that Hayden Roberts, the Chief Inspector of Greater Manchester Police, concerned, has wrote to the MP asking for help. Remember, McMahon was at the time leader of Oldham Council. If everyone gave me £2, today I would have over £1,000, and I maybe could update some of this equipment, but sadly it isn't like that. You can see the evidence I'm laying out. You can see the evidence I'm laying out. Hayden Roberts on the 14th of March 2013, so that's earlier, isn't it? Had written to Teresa Broadbent, who had some form of safeguarding role at the council. Associate Assistant Director, Safeguarding and Vulnerable Children is what Teresa Broadbent's role was. So Teresa Broadbent first writes and Hayden responds. So let me start with the bottom. Hi Hayden. You may already be aware of some concerns about a premises on King Street opposite the Star Inn. Huey, that's Huey McDonald, did his job and alerted me earlier today to information received about young women seen entering the premises and concerned over the use of the premises. Huey is keen for the local Strategic Children's Board to be receiving regular monthly reports on CSE, including monthly reports on police activity to prosecute disrupt. The policeman, Chief Inspector, responds, copies in Hughie MacDonald as well. This is the premises I mentioned at the last board meeting. This is a real emerging safeguarding issue. We are arranging for joint patrols with police and college staff at key times. There are now several premises which are formerly pubs which seem to be operating as venues available for hire for private parties, shisha bars, accommodation, rooms to rent by the hour. We have had multiple meetings and discussions which really don't come up with a plan. The risks around CSE are massive. The risks around CSE are massive. And this scumbag, Keir Starmer's boy, Jim McMahon, Minister of State, we agreed not to broadcast anything after you told us that knowledge about the activities at these clubs was very limited. Yet in 2013, in March 2013, one of the most senior police officers in the town is informing the council that the risks around CSE are massive, and so massive, he's also then wrote to Michael Meacher, the MP. Hughie MacDonald goes running, takes action, goes running to save and safeguard children in a town that he has lived in his entire life, that he has served his entire adult life. The chief magistrate in charge of safeguarding, he goes and blows the whistle by going to the connection service and making sure that they know. And one of the reasons he went there was because the council, as in the small print of that report that's come out that he hides, they were meant to raise the issue at a head teachers meeting so that all head teachers could be warned and warn their students. That warning never took place in that meeting. We've exposed that. Hughie releases it. They find out that he's warned people off, and this is what they do to him. Dewey. 24th of June. Private and confidential. Paul, thanks for your email Friday, which prompts further questions. They're trying to suspend him at this point. Has the local authority received any expressions of concern or criticism from the police about my alleged disclosure of information to a concerned political colleague? Is the local authority making a formal complaint or accusation against me? And if it is so, what is it? Could I have an early reply? Paul Entwistle is the borough solicitor. Response, thank you for your email. The police did raise concern that given the safeguarding responsibilities of the council and those representing the council in senior positions with safeguarding duties, the information in Mr. Roberts' email had been forwarded to a third party not connected with the council or the safeguarding board. So apparently the police complained. I've not seen any documents anywhere that suggest the police complained that Hughie MacDonald had raised concern. If the police are complaining, then the police are complicit in trying to keep this secret, aren't they? The police were also concerned, oh here we go, that some of the details in the email appears in a press inquiry. How dare other people know that children are being dragged off the street and being gang raped? How dare they? The leader of the council, that's Jimmy McMahon, has provisionally indicated that this matter be dealt with as a group issue rather than through a formal standards complaint at this stage, but I am awaiting the leader to revert to me to confirm that this is his position. So if you don't behave, lad, we're going to sack you for a formal standards complaint. So come grovelling back to me. From Councillor Jim McMahon. CC Tony Lloyd. You can see Tony Lloyd is there. Barbara Brownbridge is there. Is she still a councillor? Have we got rid of her? I think she's still a councillor, isn't she? Paul Entwistle has just retired. Charlie Parker was the former chief executive. Dear Mr. Entwistle, regarding Councillor Hughie MacDonald, we are writing to refer a complaint to the Standards Committee for a formal investigation. The complaint is that Councillor Hugh MacDonald leaked a confidential email to a member of the public who subsequently sent the information to a reporter at BBC Greater Manchester. The details of the complaint are as followed. On the 5th of June, Councillor Stretton, as Cabinet member liaising with the police, wrote requesting information on the use of shisha bars in Oldham Town Centre for illegal activity. A response followed which gave a comprehensive report on which town centre premises were under review and suspected of illegal activity. The following day, BBC Greater Manchester contacted the council, making inquiries on the same issue. Following an exchange of telephone calls and emails, it became clear that the reporter had been briefed or had sight of the email from the previous day. Following internal discussions, a search of the council's email system was carried out. During this search, the original email was found to have been forwarded by Councillor Hugh MacDonald to Mr. Joe Fitzpatrick. Ooh, I wonder what relation he is to Kevin Fitzpatrick, the father and son. The reporter from BBC GMR who made contact with the council was Mr. Kevin Fitzpatrick, the son of Mr. Joe Fitzpatrick. The contents of the email were highly sensitive and the leak had the potential to compromise an ongoing police and safeguarding investigation. Bullshit. Absolute bullshit. Because now Newsom has admitted that children were being gang raped in these shisha bars from as early as 2011. The press interest in this matter has continued, and we feel it appropriate, given the seriousness of the matter, that the matter is now dealt with formally. And this is the letter in August. So this is a subsequent letter from Kevin Fitzpatrick in August. They're using the funeral of Lee Rigby. McMahon is claiming knowledge was very limited. So the leader of Oldham Council suspended and then essentially sacked the safeguarding councillor for raising concerns and leaking something. Perhaps he shouldn't have leaked it, but what would you have done in his place? What would any of you have done in his place? We now know, confirmed, that children were being groomed and gang raped, dragged off the streets. What would you have done? This is clear evidence of the leader of the council, Jim Ignatius Rook McMah, attempting to shut down and keep hidden information of Pakistani rape gangs operating in Oldham through a network of shisha bars. This is clear evidence. How can his knowledge have been very limited? This is me yesterday on the train to London. And that's where I'm getting my sleep at the moment. I'm going to play a second video. So after the cover-up happens, the report comes out. Jimmy McMahon issues his statement with Angela Rayner, now Deputy Leader of His Majesty's Government, Deputy Prime Minister. Deputy Prime Minister. He stands up and does this. I'm not going to play all of it. I just want to play the introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Can I just say how moving I thought the closing of that debate was, in particular your contribution, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'd like to start by thanking you and the Opposition Chief Whip for granting me permission to bring forward this important debate to the House of Commons chamber today. As those in the House will be aware, it's rare for a front bench spokesperson to take to the back benches and to lead an adjournment debate. It reflects the issue of safeguarding and child sexual exploitation in Oldham, and allowing this debate to be had highlights just how important that is. This debate builds on the joint statement issued by myself, the Honourable Member, my friend, the Member for Oldham East and Saddleworth, and the Right Honourable Member for Ashton-under-Lyne. I want to set out how I intend to use the time we have today. Firstly, to focus on victims and the findings of the report. Secondly, to focus on the safeguarding challenges during the period covered by the review. And finally, to touch on the disinformation campaign surrounding it. Mr. Deputy Speaker, child sexual exploitation is a painful reality that all sides of this House recognise. It's in every community and we must fight it together. The National Independent Inquiry into Sexual Abuse, chaired by Professor Alexis Jay, was published in February this year. Its stark conclusions demonstrate that children are sexually exploited by organised networks in all parts of the country in the most degrading and destructive ways. Last week, the Independent Assurance Review into historic child sexual exploitation in Oldham was published, and it's important that the House has the opportunity to debate it. I would like to place on record my thanks to those who led the independent review team, notably Malcolm Newson, who I'm sure the Minister will know from his work in the Home Office, and former senior police officer Gary Ridgway. On release of the report, Mr Newson said, "We found that throughout this period, especially services tackling child sexual exploitation provided by Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police was strategically ahead of those available to many local authorities at the time. However, these did not always translate at an operational level into the effective safeguarding of children experiencing sexual exploitation." He went on to say, "Our own review of a sample of children has exposed significant failings provided by the statutory authorities to those children. We understand that Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police have agreed to reduce the management of those cases to consider whether any further action can now be taken in respect of the men who exploited those children. In that context, it was right for Greater Manchester Police and for the Council to accept the findings in full and to give a full and unqualified apology to those who were let down. In response, Council Leader Amanda Chatterton told the press conference on the day, the vast majority of those children received the support they needed and they were kept safe.
First thing I need to pick up on, the vast majority of those children received the support they needed and were kept safe. What is the vast majority? Do you see how the cover-up goes full circle? And now they repeat it in Parliament and that's the end of it? Do you see how many layers there are now to this cover-up?
The report references some of the commendable work of our social workers in children's homes, but what is clear is that that wasn't true for all children. And one child let down is one child too many. It's absolutely imperative that our residents have confidence in those people that work to protect our children. The report included the case of Sophie, whose abuse began in 2006 when she was just 12 years old. There were a further 10 sample cases which were later referred to the Messenger Project, but which were not adequately followed up by Greater Manchester Police or by social services. The Council has confirmed that during the course of the review period, 11,000 safeguarding referrals were made to the authority.
So there you have it. Jim McMahon confirms. It is Jim McMahon in Parliament who confirms 11,000 safeguarding referrals made. During that time, it's Jim McMahon who signed his own death warrant. His political career is now over. He should be arrested and prosecuted. He won't be, but that's what should happen. I want to, if you're still with me, we've been here for 2 hours, if you're still with me, I want to just go through a number of extracts from the actual report to demonstrate the extent of the cover-up. If there was any doubt, regardless of what he stood up and said, Newsom stood up and said, that now they've used in a parliamentary letter-headed document and repeated in Parliament to complete full circle the cover-up. Unfortunately, and he goes on, by the way, to call me a racist and all sorts in this parliamentary speech, names me, and goes on to say that somehow I'm involved in safeguarding failures. Absolute lie. 100% a lie, because if I was involved in any safeguarding failures of any sort, someone would have come and spoken to me or arrested me or charged me, because that's how the law works in this country. I'm not a politician. I definitely don't control any block votes. Thank you for the super chat. If you're finding value, please do consider buying me a coffee, supporting me via PayPal, and I will continue. This is Jimmy Mack, an MP, elected off the back of 100% surge in postal votes in one area, as reported on the front page of a newspaper. Those postal votes came from the Oldham Central Mosque. Page 101 of the report. We have been provided with a copy of an email sent by Senior Communications Officer A to Chief Executive A on the 24th of October. After a series of phone calls and extremely robust conversations with Kevin Fitzpatrick, he has now backed down and agreed to completely drop the stories on A, redacted as not within our terms of reference. How nice of him, eh? And B, Councillor V. I also, after some fact-finding with Chief Inspector A, convinced him there is no issue with private members' clubs in Oldham. All premises referred to that in that infamous email are now out of operation, and we monitor them every week. In comparison with other neighbours across Lancashire, we simply don't have a problem. Not we don't have a problem. In comparison with other places, we don't have a problem. Well, in comparison with where? So we only have 10 kids gang raped a week. In Bradford, they have 2,000. What? He has now also dropped the story. Dropped that story. Do you see? Does that look like the journalist robustly went after the story? It has taken nearly 2 days, but killing all three is a right old result in the end. P.S. If you didn't know, we've also won Best City at Northwest in Bloom again today. That man is Carl Marsden. It's copied into some of those emails at the beginning. That email with the yellow highlighting, you'll see Carl Marsden copied in there. He's celebrating hiding news of children being gang raped in shisha bars. His wife is Dawn Marsden, who worked at the Oldham Cron at the time. You don't see the Oldham Cron reporting on this, did you? No, because Dawn Marsden worked at the Oldham Times at the time. And Dawn Marsden is now in the senior team of Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister. Here, let me show you something. Here is Dawn Marsden just before Christmas. Look where she is. Driver 3 had been questioned by police in relation to 2 separate alleged sexual assault 3 years apart on 2 young female passengers. What is young female? 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 16-year-olds? In relation to the first of these, Greater Manchester Police had supplied information to the panel that there was sufficient evidence to prosecute the victim, but the victim would not support the prosecution. So he'd sexually assaulted her, but the victim, a young woman, didn't want to go through with it. But the police still gave the licensing panel the information. In respect of the second offence, Greater Manchester Police supplied supporting evidence as follows. The aggrieved person would not provide a statement and just wanted to inform the police of what had happened. The driver denied any incident occurred and stated there is a cage between him and passengers in the vehicle. Although the police took no further action, the legal advice to the panel was clear and that it should make a judgment on the balance of probabilities. It is our view that there was sufficient concern presented to the panel in respect of these allegations for it to revoke driver 3's licence. The panel didn't. In the case of driver 4, the detail of the offence is also concerning. It was alleged that the victim was sexually assaulted in his taxi and subsequently raped. No further information was supplied to the licensing panel other than that the Crown Prosecution Service had taken no further action. Given the serious nature of the offence and the involvement with a paying customer, it would have been helpful for officers to have further furnished the panel with more details surrounding the circumstances that led to the allegations. The police didn't give them the information properly either. A small number of drivers who had either been convicted or suspected of sexual offences were allowed to continue as licensed drivers. Furthermore, as we have indicated, one driver mentioned in the September 2014 report went on to commit a sexual assault on a young female passenger in 2015. He was subsequently convicted, and the judge queried why a licence had been granted given his previous conviction. Well, the man in charge of the council is Jim McMahon. You like this? You love this. In 2007, Oldham Council introduced an innovative approach by developing a specialist residential care facility, Rivendale House, for young women at risk of child sexual exploitation. Let me translate that to you. They opened a brothel for young women, for children. In 2007, Oldham Council introduced an innovative approach, you can definitely call it innovative, by developing a specialist residential care facility, Rivendale House, for young women, for children at risk of child sex exploitation. Yeah, read it yourself. You can see it at the top. We have heard from previous managers and staff that this approach worked well in the first 12 months, and the residential team was well supported by the police officers in the community and regular meetings with the messenger service. After 12 months, the funding was reduced, and the staff we interviewed believed they became less effective. What does that mean? By 2010, Rivendale was no longer a specialist facility. While there was some agreement that there were some benefits from this role, its location was not ideal, and accommodating several young people who were already involved in CSE could attract unwanted attention from users. So they opened We have found a small number of children who were known to be sexually exploited were visiting shisha bars throughout 2011, 2012 and 2013. Limited knowledge, McMahon claims. 3 years, those 3 years before that email, McMahon was already the leader of the council, 2011, 2012 and 2013. For most of this period, the specialist messenger team, that's their own child sex exploitation team, set up to tackle child sex exploitation, did not participate in the disruption activities. Children as young as 13 and 14 who were known to be sexually exploited were visiting these venues. McMahon, the way they defend McMahon, before we get to that, there is no doubt that there were throughout this period legitimate concerns on the part of both the council and the police that the high-profile convictions of predominantly Pakistani offenders across the country could be capitalised on by the far-right agenda and lead to the victimisation of the Pakistani community. Apparently, however, it is clear from all the evidence we have seen that the council and its partners in no way avoided addressing this, unless your name was Hughie MacDonald and you raised alarm bells so you got sacked. And they used the evidence to say this is explicitly addressed by Leader A, that's McMahon, in a public statement he made in his blog. Wanker! Newsom, you're a wanker. You don't make public statements on a council blog, you piece of shit. The leader of 2013, how many people read online blogs? Where the councillor would normally talk about, oh, today we've won this, today the bins have been, we've changed the size of the dustbins. You make a public statement in the fucking council chamber. You make a public statement in the newspaper via a press release. This is the clearest evidence you've got, if you've not got clear evidence already, of how Malcolm Newsom and Gary Ridgway, Burnham's boys, were neck deep in spinning something here to make it look like McMahon was not responsible for the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of children. This is explicitly addressed by McMahon Leader 8 in a public statement he made on his blog. You do not, sorry. My apologies. Children were being groomed and gang raped since 2011 that they know of, because their investigation doesn't go before 2011, does it? So we don't know what happened in 2010. We don't even know how many children were groomed and gang raped. Anyone who shies away from accepting that in Rotherham. So in 2014, this statement came about as a consequence of the Alexis J report in Rotherham. He makes no reference about the shisha bars and warning parents. There are several allegations may fall outside our terms of reference. Well, if you ask me, they're all interconnected, which is why I made them. The allegations of any potential links between Oldham Council and organised crime. The allegations of safeguarding arrangements in place for mosques and madrasa teachers. The allegations that there were impropriety by the council in the sale of property and land, and the allegation that politicians in Oldham have been complicit in postal voter fraud. On the 21st of January 2020, we sent a request to Oldham Council to approach the individual who had been instrumental in posting the allegations on his webpage, me. The council contacted me on the 12th of February 2020. Remember, the council had already been contacting me, threatening me. The council leader had been sending me messages mocking me. The MP had been trying to get me arrested and had already set up Operation in Hexagon as a consequence of me bringing this to the public attention. He informed Oldham Council that he would not agree to his personal data being shared with the review team. Well, they had no right to me anyway, because they had no access to my data. He then later posted on Facebook the following: if Andy Burnham's review team want to contact me, they can do so directly here. I am more than happy to give testimony, providing 1, they contact me on Facebook and publicly address concerns regarding their so-called independence, including clarifying their terms of reference. Specifically, I was already raising concerns of how they were going to take the testimony of people by choosing and picking and choosing what bits they liked, taking selective notes. And they agreed to me providing my testimony in the council chambers, and the exchange be available to members of the public who are allowed to attend, and also live stream to those who cannot attend. I have absolutely nothing to hide. I sure as hell don't fear any paedophile protecting politicians or their council stooges. Let's see who has been telling the barefaced lies. You know where to find me. Well, have I been proven right? Apparently they could not proceed to interview the individual concerned. It's nonsense. It was rigged from the start. As you've seen, it was rigged from the start. How are we doing? I hope so, Sam. You want more? Do you want more? Are we still awake? It's 11:30. I'll give you more. If you want more, I'll give you more. Just type you want more. I'll keep giving you more. On 17th of January 2011, a meeting was held on the community impact of publicity around sexual exploitation of young girls by Asian men. It was attended by officers from Greater Manchester Police and the Council and by representatives of the faith committees. So the mosques met with the police and the council, concerned about the impact it would have on the community, on the Muslim community, that girls were getting gang raped. This meeting openly discussed the assertion that there was a view that the police and social services were suppressing the issues because of political correctness. The minutes clearly articulate the complexity of the issues that the Council and Greater Manchester Police were grappling with. No, what the minutes do is show something else. Let me read the minutes. Sexual exploitation is a real issue and we need to be addressing it. People feel strongly about this issue and there is a potential for it to escalate. There is a perception that there is a conspiracy of silence due to political correctness and that some areas are not dealing with the issue. The far right argued that it is religiously motivated and that there is a justification for this in the Quran. They stereotype Muslim men in general and portray it as a cultural issue. They allege that Muslim men have negative attitudes towards women in general and that they perceive many white girls to be sluts. There is a need to continue to protect children and bring the perpetrators to justice and continue to provide support to the messenger team. Further cases in Oldham might bring wider media interest and further exploitation of the issue by the BMP and English Defence League. There is therefore a risk of further demonstrations and the risk of increased hate crimes. There is a need to consider the impact of this issue on Muslim communities as they are feeling demonised. Get stuffed. There is not a need to consider the impact on this on Muslim communities. There is a need to go and arrest the bastards that are grooming and gang raping children, whoever they are. This is the police and the council. These is an extract from the minutes of the meeting. I reckon they pulled out the bits that they could share. I reckon the other bits are worse. Limited knowledge. Very limited knowledge, claimed the Secretary of State, Jim Ignatius Rook McMah. And those who've been on this journey with me, okay, will share with you. I am not here for clicks or views or money or any of that. I spent my life safeguarding children and protecting our nation from extremists. I mobilised my community, my town, the people of my town. The genuine far right tried to exploit it. We chased them away because the people of my town gathered around me and believed that this needs to be dealt with irrespective of who the race is of the perpetrator. Whatever they think of any wider community impact is relevant, if anything. It would strengthen communities if people like me from that community spoke out and said this needs to be stopped. And that is why the EDL or whoever or whatever has got no traction in Oldham. It is because this fight has been led by me. And for that, these people tried to kill me. And now you see the evidence. Now you see the evidence, and now you see the cover-up and the way in which the cover-up was orchestrated. What do you say now? What do you say? Despite areas requiring improvement. So apparently they got these strengths. And you can go and read the report yourself. I've extracted bits. If you believe I'm misrepresenting, go and read the 200 odd pages yourself. Despite these strengths, out of the 10 cases we considered, none were protected from child sex exploitation. What an interesting way to write a sentence. Every case we looked at, children were gang raped. And the authorities failed to protect them. Out of the 10 cases we considered, none were protected from child sexual exploitation. So the sample they looked at, a sample of 10 cases, every child was gang raped and the council and the police failed them. Well, how many cases are there of the 11,000? The plans in place were generally weak and unspecific. There was little evidence that the allocated social workers spent time building a significant relationship with the young person, and much of the activity by professionals was devoted to monitoring what was known about the exploitation rather than putting in place an assertive plan to prevent and disrupt its occurrence. Statutory child protection procedures in place at the time were on many occasions not being followed. This was particularly the case when it was alleged that the young person had experienced significant harm through physical or sexual abuse or had been found in a situation of considerable risk. That means when we found they were being gang raped, we failed to follow our own child protection procedures. That means we covered it up. That's what that translates to. Whilst on occasion the police would interview the young person, in many instances a strategy discussion was not held to agree a multi-agency response, and only very rarely was the meeting followed up by a Section 47 child protection investigation as required, as lawfully required. There was a strong emphasis on the young people not taking responsibility for protecting themselves. Phrases such as putting herself at risk, it was your fault, you were asking for it. If 4 men raped you at once, you were the one asking for it. Putting herself at risk was a phrase regularly used within the minutes of meetings set up to protect the young person. This was despite the evidence that the children were being drugged or made senseless on vodka and then subjected to violent rapes, often by several men in succession, and to serious physical assaults, coercion and threats. I'm going to force myself to read that again. There was a strong emphasis on the young people not taking responsibility for protecting themselves. Phrases such as putting herself at risk were regularly used within the minutes of meetings set up to protect the young person. This is despite the evidence that the children were being drugged or made senseless on vodka and then subjected to violent rapes, often by several men in succession, and to serious physical assaults, coercion and threats. Give me a moment, please. Please stay with me. I'm not going anywhere. Just give me a moment. My friend Louise sent me some goodies. They arrived in the post. I did get them, Louise. They were waiting for me. If you're finding value in the broadcast, please try and press like. Please try not to get drawn into those who want to deflect and divert. The reason I pick on this issue is because these children were failed because it was politically profitable to do so. I'm not getting drawn into white grooming gangs, this, that, something else. I was put in a place where I was handed a dossier of files by men I respected. One who's dead, a friend of mine, now passed away, and I promised to see this through. There are many injustices in the world, and me tackling on this does not mean I do not care about any of the others. I cannot do anything about any of the others. All I can do is what I can do, which is this. And I'll try my best to see it through. In December 2010, a joint visit made to Cafe Mist by the Oldham licensing officer and Greater Manchester Police city centre officers found 25 men and young women aged 16 to 25 there. Upon leaving, a number of known Glodic boys, that's the Pakistani gangsters. Upon leaving, a number of known Glodic boys with links to drugs were hanging about near to the bar, seeing what the police attention was all about, namely, redact the names. It is believed that several of the Operation Messenger girls are frequenting Cafe Miss Shisha Bar, where they are associating with older Asian males and using cannabis. Child 1 and Child 2 have been frequenting, name of Shisha Bar redacted. So there are grave concerns as to why age is redacted. Why would you redact the ages of girls in an inquiry? Tell me, why would you redact the ages? Are they 9? Are they 10? Child 3 and Child 5 also started to go there. These children were in their early teens at the time, so that's the other 2. We've established that 2 of these children were known to be still frequenting shisha bars some 18 months later in the summer of 2012. Very limited knowledge is what Jim McMahon, the leader of Oldham Council, is saying when here his own Oldham licensing officer is reporting on this. In April 2011, a licensed taxi driver met a child who was under 16 at the time in a shisha bar. Well, what's under 16? 11? 12? He was subsequently charged with rape offence, with an offence of rape of this child, which was said to have occurred in July 2011. He was subsequently found not guilty, but he admitted to meeting the child in a shisha bar and to using his taxi for the purpose of sexual activity with the child, after taking of her food and purchasing items for her in a supermarket. So, this taxi driver raped a girl under 16. The courts found him not guilty, even though he admitted to using his taxi for the purpose of sexual activity. In the United Kingdom, a child under 16 cannot consent to sex, particularly with, in the context of this, an older taxi driver. Who was this taxi driver? Who was he connected to? This is one of the most blatant examples. Oh, what's gone on? This is, can I find it? Here we go. During street safe duties on Friday the 15th of June 2012, so it's summer, a police constable in the company of a police sergeant and 2 council officials, so there's 2 police officers and 2 council officers, entered the building in the rear of Klutz, which was one of the shisha bars. The reason for entering the premises was that the constable had seen an unknown female, later identified as Child 5, leaving the building upset and crying. 2 rooms were occupied by 4 Asian men in their early 20s. A further search of the 2nd floor discovered Child 6, who had alcohol in her possession. Child 6's parents were called and she was collected. She was with Child 7 and Child 8, who had also entered the premises. The following evening, the same police constable reported seeing a man dragging Child 9 into the rear of the shisha bar. A police constable reported seeing a man dragging a child into the rear of a shisha bar. This is when I say in broad daylight. The constable intervened and took hold of the man. Child 9 ran away and hid inside the premises, where she was later discovered hiding in the toilets on the 2nd floor. Child 9 was with her friend, Child 10, who was also found near the rear of the premises, and stated that she was looking for Child 9. Child 9 disclosed she had been in the premises a week earlier, The police constable recorded that social services were involved. Oldham Council had confirmed that a referral was not received from Greater Manchester Police. The account is verified by Greater Manchester Police, which was unable to locate a copy of the referral. Dragged off the street into a shisha bar. No one arrested. So these child 9, child 10s, these are children that they know were groomed and gang raped. That's why the reference is child 9, child 10. On 21st of July 2012, the police made a visit to Oasis Cafe, issued 3 fixed penalty notices, following a report by a parent that her teenage daughter had been smoking shisha there with older Asian men. Although numerous intelligence reports of Asian males and young girls visiting these premises were raised, and although these girls were thought to be vulnerable, the intelligence reports were not forwarded to the messenger team as they were not known as messenger subjects. What that means is there were far more girls being groomed and gang raped than what they knew about. June 2012, Oldham Young People's Charity Positive Steps reported that child 2 was still visiting shisha bars. She was age 14 at the time. So if she's still visiting shisha bars and she's age 14 at the time and it's 18, you can imagine, can't you? Yeah, she was probably 12. Child 11 had been at Klutz Bar in Oldham, a shisha bar that the police are monitoring heavily and Oldham Council are trying to close down, 9th of July 2012. It is concerning that this bar has private rooms to rent upstairs also and is reportedly alcohol-free with smoking bunks. Private rooms to rent upstairs. The council knew about it. McMahon claims very limited knowledge. As concerns in respect of Klutz mounted, a further meeting was held between officers from the council and Greater Manchester Police. The notes of the meeting stated there are serious concerns about the sexual activity going on in the rooms and the potential links to child sexual exploitation. There's a meeting takes place between the council and Greater Manchester Police. 2nd of July 2013. Chief Superintendent A opens the meeting with the statement. Recognition was needed of the political sensitivities surrounding shisha bars. Recognition was needed of the political sensitivities surrounding shisha bars when they are being described as being used by Asian males to have sex with white females. Political sensitivities. Following discussion, there was a consensus that there may be a perception of CSE occurring at these premises, but during all visits conducted by officers, there has been no hard or fast evidence to substantiate this. Complete nonsense, because we've seen the evidence. And even Ridgeway is saying 2011, 2012, 2013. It was agreed that the Greater Manchester Police press officer should contact the BBC to try and talk them out of running the story, as there is no substantive evidence to suggest that CSE is occurring in any of these premises, and they are not in fact shisha bars. They are no shisha bars in Oldham. So that is the cover-up. That is the cover-up. And I go back to this page. Some of our sample were chosen because we had seen reports that had been seen in shisha bars by street patrols. Clearly, shisha bars were a magnet for young people vulnerable to sexual exploitation, and it is also clear that children were being exploited on the premises. One child was seen having sex at a well-known shisha bar, and also disclosed that she went to another shisha bar to sleep with lads. And despite all of this evidence, McMahon claims he had very limited knowledge. And you can clearly see that that chief superintendent and the police press officer is what they did to shut down the investigation, or shut down the press even looking into it. Chief Superintendent A acknowledged this is a good point, and the Greater Manchester Police press officer amended the draft statement accordingly. The premises we are talking about here are not shisha bars, but rather private establishments bought through auction for a cheap price and then used for private purposes. As you say, entry is through knocking on the door and is for private members only. The main point is the one about CSE and possibly grooming going on at these premises. From the report you've seen, you'll see there is only 2 pieces of intelligence Greater Manchester Police have ever received about possible sexual exploitation. Enforcement action was taken. It's a complete lie. It's a complete lie. This is where our main concern would lie. Given the tensions in Oldham with EDL, etc., and the upcoming funeral of Fusilier Lee Rigby, we're concerned that any sensationalist and inaccurate reporting about CSE occurring at these private clubs, when there is no evidence to back that up, would cause an uproar in Oldham and seriously affect community relations, leading to possible protests and disorder. Our proposal we could look at would be to hold fire on the story for now and revisit this when we have more evidence of what is going on at these premises, and involve yourselves in any operation. This email was sent out on the 3rd of July 2013. We now have confirmation that from as early as 2011, that's the earliest point that this Ridgway and Newsom could investigate, shisha bars in Oldham were grooming and gang raping children. When we made our allegations online and we named Kevin Fitzpatrick and McMahon approached Kevin Fitzpatrick. He should not have been approaching anyone, trying to get the story straight. Journalist A explained in his interview that he never received a fuller response to his email, although this had been promised by Leader A, McMah. He did share with the review team that in 2019, they had a conversation as the matter was being raised on social media. Leader A asked him if they had ever spoken about this subject. Journalist A said no, and Leader A then asked why the email said, "You told me," if they never spoke about it. Journalist A explained that he had meant you, as in the organisation. And Leader A commented, "That was unfortunate." Can you see what's going on there? Yeah? Can you see what's going on there? Correspondence from and to members, but not copied to officers of the council, has not been retrieved as this was not archived. So they've lost a whole host of emails, apparently. But they've got to take the council's word for that, because they can't go looking for the emails. There's something about Sophie and the Home Affairs Select Committee. The chief executive apparently replied to the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee. It's inconceivable that the chief executive would reply to the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee without consulting or the involvement of the council leader. You see who they're protecting and how they're continuing to protect this? I can confirm that Sophie was known to Oldham Children's Services, blah, 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 all of that. Last sentence. Additionally, the complaint is beyond the bounds of what would reasonably come within the complaint process, both in regard to the passage of time and the litigious nature of the outcome sought. The passage of time. It happened too long ago. And she wants to claim some money or something, so we're not going to look at it. She wants justice. That's the council's response to the Home Affairs Select Committee. And we are to believe that the leader of the council was not aware. We received a letter from Oldham's Managing Director of Children's Services on 21st of May 2021, advising the review team that the council believed that any further approach to Sophie to seek her consent to participate in the review could be seriously damaging to her welfare and providing some additional privileged information. The Managing Director confirmed that Sophie had been made aware of the review and had not given her consent to participate. They concluded this letter by setting out the following concerns. The council is in receipt of expert assessments in relation to Sophie, which has been directed by the court and therefore cannot be disclosed without the express permission of the court. I am confident that the professional opinions expressed within these assessments would support the council's conclusion that engagement with the review team at this time may well pose a considerable risk to Sophie. So, what am I saying? The young woman who is specifically referenced in this, the council wrote a letter to the investigating team saying basically she's a suicide risk if you want to speak to her. And yet she went crying to Maggie Oliver and Maggie Oliver forced a meeting. Do you see? My friends, I have been accused of making all of this up, of having no evidence, and that somehow I'm a conspiracy theorist, I'm a far-right activist, and I have a vendetta. On the last day I write, I have a vendetta against any public official or politician that was involved in facilitating or covering up the grooming and gang rape of children. On that they are 100% certain I do have a vendetta. I believe the evidence I've set out is conclusive. Tomorrow, I'll share with you how they are trying to scupper even the investigation that they have to do. Please share this video far and wide. I know it's long. People say, Raja, you need to do things in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I can't. This can't be done in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And if it can, you need someone else to do it because I can't do it like that. I'm very thorough. I'm very methodical. And you can see the extent of the cover-up in terms of the process they went through and how even the contents of the report does not reflect the rhetoric of what was said in the press conference. Malcolm Newser and Gary Ridgway have subsequently quit from Andy Burnham's review team. And McMahon is once again attempting to have me arrested. Meanwhile, I am very clear. We must have a public inquiry. And now what's happened in Oldham with what we know is happening everywhere, there needs to be a national inquiry. And the politicians involved in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our town's children and the nation's children need to be held to account for their actions. Please, if you find value, support me. You can buy me a coffee. There's a PayPal link. You can buy me you can do a super chat. I've had just under 5,000 people join me this evening. If each of you paid me £2, that means me done for the year. Please, no one else is going to do this for you. You've seen what I've done. You've seen how I've gone about it. You've seen how I've led the campaign. You've seen how they're petrified of me and what they've tried to do to shut me down. Help me see it through to the end. A very good night.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius Rook McMah was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011 he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.